Hi, everyone. My name is Ralph Bouquet, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Nova Labs. Really excited that everybody's tuned in to this webinar. I'm really excited to be joined today by Josh Rosenau from the National Center for Science Education. Today's webinar is called Stick to the Science, Teaching to End Evolution Denialism, and I'm really excited to have him here, and I'll just let him introduce himself really briefly. Hi, Josh.
Hi, thanks for having me on, and thanks everyone for joining us.
All right,
So,
great. Yeah.
should I tell you a little bit about NCSE and what
Yeah,
we do?
absolutely.
We're a nonprofit. We're dedicated to defending evolution and other sciences in schools, and to helping teachers deal with conflicts and controversies when they come up in the classroom, and make sure that sciences like evolution and climate change and other things that get caught up in political contention are taught accurately.
Great, great. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, and one of the reasons why we are actually talking about this topic is because we recently launched our new lab on evolution called the Evolution Lab. And I can actually jump to it really quickly and show you what that's all about. Go. All right. So the Evolution Lab is a game it's basically a game that uses phylogeny and an interactive tree of life to help students explore the relationships between species and the history of life on Earth. There are two major parts of the Evolution Lab. One is Build a Tree. And so Build a Tree basically is a game in which you are using phylogenetics and using morphology as well as DNA evidence to actually build these phylogenetic trees. And we structured each one of these missions around a different piece of evolution, of evidence for evolution. And so we cover topics such as fossil evidence, biogeography, the use of DNA. And so they're all organized into these 6 missions that you can see here. And the game is sequentially organized, so you complete 3 levels in each mission and watch videos that sort of explain and introduce these topics. And so, yeah, really great part of it. The other part is the deep tree. And so the deep tree is a very great interactive that allows you to explore this tree of life. And basically a really great way to show students sort of deep time and to really emphasize just the scale of time that it's taken for all these different species to evolve. And basically you can select from a group of species and compare sort of the relationships between a variety of different species. So I can drag here an echidna and a Dominican anole, and then the deep tree basically zooms me to where they are in the tree of life and shows sort of all the relationships between those species. I can actually speed it up really quickly. And again, the scope is huge. And then I can actually jump here and sort of see the shared ancestry and sort of where all the points of commonality between these 2 different species. And so it's a really, really great interactive. Again, you can access it by going to our website, pbs.org/nova/labs, and you'll see it right there on the home page. And again, there also are some additional resources that you can use to actually teach the Evolution Lab or to add it to your curriculum. So we have an educator guide that has a lesson plan, some teaching tips as well. There's also an NGSS guide and support guide for educators. And then over in PBS Learning and Media, we have an entire collection of lesson plans, discussion questions for all the videos. You can also download the videos there. But all this stuff is available for you to teach this in your classroom. So let me just hop back into our presentation. There we go. But yeah, so this is one of the main reasons why we decided to host this webinar, and I'm really excited because the NCSE is doing some really great work in this space with regards to talking about evolution denialism and helping teachers find the tools in which to challenge the denialism that might be facing from, just within their schools, but also in some cases, unfortunately, in their departments of education in their states and in their school districts as well. So I'm going to let Josh sort of take it away from here. So Josh has been really, really gracious in putting together a great presentation for us that will sort of outline some of the key topics in how to challenge evolution denialism, sort of what the landscape looks like right now, what the NCSC is doing, and how teachers like you can access these great resources to deal with it and manage it in your classroom and in your school districts. So, yeah, Josh, I'll let you take it away from here. Oh, Josh, I don't think we can hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself, so I didn't interrupt you before.
Okay.
It's great to be here talking about this because, like you said, evolution is often comes under attack, but it's such a central concept, and a lot of teachers, even if they don't actually get any pushback, sometimes feel afraid to wade into it because they don't even without having had anything bad happen, they're worried about what's going to happen. And a lot of scientists who I've talked to who would like to do more public outreach or go into classrooms and talk about it are afraid of what they're going to face. And I think, and that's just a shame. So things like the Nova Lab that gives good examples of how to do it right can be really valuable for that, and there are great resources there. So I'm still checking out, and I hope everyone else does too. So I'm going to start off with talk a little bit about what we at NCSC do and what we've found effective at cutting through some of the controversy that goes on out there. Like I said, we're a nonprofit based in California, but we work nationally and internationally. We're online. We're on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and I don't think we've got a Pinterest page, but one day. And we do all sorts of stuff. We worked a year ago with Bill Nye when he was getting ready for this massive televised debate with Ken Ham. In general, we're not huge fans of debate, but in that case, we much prefer to see Bill do well than not. And he came out. He spent a weekend with us getting ready for it to make sure that he was prepared to go up against the founder of the Creation Museum in Kentucky. Those of you who are not familiar, this is this massive facility with animatronic dinosaurs, and they're working on building a life-sized ark that they'll have as a theme park with a scale model of the Tower of Babel, because that worked out so well last time. But we also work with much smaller scale events. A couple weeks ago, there was a story out of Rio Grande High School in California where a teacher had been, for 3 class periods, had brought in the video of that Ken Ham-Bill Nye debate and showed it in the classroom, making encouraging comments about the creationist perspective in his science class. And that's just not something that should happen. And we helped work with the parents and other community members to make that stop. But often as not, it's not the teachers or the community that's necessarily the problem. It's broader issues. We were involved in efforts to make sure that evolution was presented accurately in Texas textbooks. Texas is one of the largest markets in the textbook markets in the country. Publishers really pay close attention to what happens there. So we were very involved in getting the good books adopted and in making sure that the standards were written well as well. All across the country, we've been fighting against anti-science legislation that would make it harder for a teacher to discipline a student who's disruptive for interrupting classes with creationist arguments every time evolution comes up, or that would make it harder for administrators to ensure that teachers are presenting evolution and are not bringing creationism in. And it's a persistent problem. We're 90 years into this. On Monday was the 90th anniversary of the conviction of John Scopes for teaching evolution in Tennessee in the famous Scopes trial. And for all the years of public polling that we have on public opinion about evolution, it's basically unchanged. And teachers are obviously at the front lines of that, both because classrooms are the best place to make long-term change in how people are looking at this, but also because they're dealing with a public that has concerns, not always about the science, but that get articulated in terms of the science. So finding ways to talk to people about evolution is often as much a matter of finding ways to make them willing to listen as it is about presenting the really powerful and compelling evidence for evolution and the incredibly useful things that we can do with it. And we found that there are three, what we talk about as the pillars of creationism, or of science denial in general, really. Obviously, the first is attacking the science. It wouldn't be science denial if along the way you weren't attacking the science. But the central pillar, and the one that really dominates that, is the moral argument of it. People think that evolution is an attack on religion, attack on traditional morality, that if you teach children that they come from animals, that they will behave like animals. These are common claims. And this is where a lot of the motivation comes from. There are very few people who wake up in the morning really angry about the idea that someone out there is saying that information can come from random mutations. That only bothers people, or the idea that giraffes and oak trees share a common ancestor is only really worrisome to people because humans are also descended from the same ancestor as giraffes and oak trees. And what does that mean morally? So these are big questions that don't really belong in a science classroom, but oftentimes that's the only place people think that they can have that conversation. And so you get to the third pillar, where it's a demand for equal time. Just as a matter of fairness, people will say, I'm a taxpayer, this is what I want in the classrooms that I'm paying for, or there are two sides here, and it's always two sides. There are two sides here, let's just present them both and let kids decide, which sounds incredibly fair. It sounds so hard to argue with, but the consequence of doing that is incredibly inequitable. So the first pillar are the common sorts of creationist arguments, dinosaurs and humans living together and so forth. But the moral argument is the one that's often most interesting. This is a figure from a creationist publication in the 80s that really illustrates the mindset that goes into it, where you've got this tree growing from the soil of unbelief, soaking up sin through the tree of biological evolution, and producing these fruits of philosophical evolution, like homosexuality and alcohol and genetic engineering and relativism and mom-child lib and hard rock and inflation and terrorism, and everything that's wrong in society is the fruit of this idea that humans are related to the rest of life. So if we could simply chop down this tree, destroy this horrible idea, we could destroy everything that's wrong with society at once. And that's why this fight has lasted so long in the United States. And the fact that it has become synonymous with that argument is why the United States, more than many other countries, has this debate. Other countries are not seeing it through that same lens as a moral argument.
And Josh, do you mind if I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
Just wanted to let everyone know who's watching that if you have questions for Josh, please use the Q&A app. If you look to the right of your screen, you should see an option for Q&A. It's like a blue button, question mark button with Q&A in the middle, or quote bubble rather. But you can submit your questions there. We'll make sure to answer them towards the end of Josh's presentation. All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I'm hitting on some topics here that I want to come back to in Q&A. So please do come back to it. And the third pillar is this idea of debate that we see over and over again. It was William Jennings Bryan in the Scopes trial was arguing that we paid for the schools and we just want to have our kids taught the way that we believe, which is not a standard that we apply in any other setting. It's not like parents are coming in there and saying, well, calculus, I don't know, let's teach both sides. So how do we overcome these common objections that are appealing? A lot of the misconceptions and a lot of the ideas that underlie the attacks on evolution are deeply emotionally appealing to people, and that's the cause of their success. When the National Academy of Sciences was developing this booklet that you can find as a free PDF online, you can order copies. It's really great. It's about 25 pages, and does a nice job of laying out the evidence for evolution and the context of this broader conflict. And when they were getting ready for it, they wanted to be sure that they were really addressing everything that the public would need to know, that teachers would need to be able to address concerns, that a member of the public who had doubts about evolution would be able to come in and read this and feel like they had been addressed. So they did a lot of public opinion work and realized, as I think a lot of teachers have, that just presenting more science, just presenting more evidence is not alone enough. So these are the outcomes that they found from their research on the public in preparing that booklet. That the first most effective argument was not just to present evolution as something that is good science, but something that's useful. Not only is it not, as creationists sometimes claim, a dying science, but it's something that is so vital that people are using it to cure cancer and using it to make major industrial advances. The second argument that they found that worked really well was to address people's concerns by pointing out that there are many people who don't see an incompatibility between science and religion, don't feel like they need to set evolution at odds with their religious beliefs. And finally, the argument that one person's personal religious viewpoints shouldn't be imposed on public school students. What's interesting is that of all of the messages that they tested, these three basically respond to the three pillars. So turning the fairness argument around and saying that it's unfair to use the science classroom to proselytize for creationism, or to turn the science classroom into a philosophy class, which is not what the teachers are certified in, it's not what they're trained in, it's not what it's for. And there are really powerful arguments to be made here. This is one of my favorite quotes. I've been telling it to everyone I get a chance to. The CEO of Solozyme, which is a major biotech company here in the Bay Area, describes what they do as we're leveraging evolution. He's not a biologist, he's an MBA, but this is how he sees their business plan, as leveraging evolution, taking what the planet's good at making, plant sugars, and turning it into what the planet needs. And that includes making fuel for the Navy, for warships at sea, making fuel for our for airlines, and making oils and waxes and other things for cosmetics and food use, because they can engineer their bacteria to do this more cheaply than going and trying to find a rare plant that has exactly the oil that they need. They can use evolution to make these bacteria do the job for them, and they can make money doing it. These are 21st century jobs. This is what people need to be ready for, to work in the 21st century, to be patients in the 21st century. And it's also something that we need in agriculture. Here we've got the search for the root of all evils. The idea of integrated pest management that is common in agriculture is really about managing evolution, making sure that pests don't evolve resistance to pesticides, taking account of the life cycle of the plants and their pests to control the pests cheaply, safely, and effectively over the long run. So this is the cartoon, but a serious point to it. And we can see that powerful evidence all over the place. This is a book that NCSC publishes that includes statements from hundreds of scientific societies, but also educational organizations, civil liberties groups, and religious groups. And this is something that I think surprises a lot of people, to realize that most of the large religious denominations in the United States are actually supportive of teaching evolution. This idea of an inherent conflict, or that religion as religion is in conflict with evolution, as a practical matter, doesn't seem to be true. When we look at public opinion, there's a wide range of religious responses to evolution. Some religions are very anti-evolution. Some religions are quite supportive of evolution, especially the mainline Protestants or Catholics, and the largest denominations are quite supportive. As is the director of the National Institutes of Health, Francis Collins, who is an evangelical Christian. At the National Institutes of Health, he's put evolution at the center of their strategy for addressing the great diseases of the day: cancer, emerging infectious diseases, all these things. And he doesn't see a conflict between the idea of evolution and his religious faith, nor do many other people. And that's a way of for that a teacher in a classroom, where it can be difficult to talk about some of these issues, putting it in that comparative context that, look, there's a range of views, and giving people a way to explore that on their own, referring them to something like Francis Collins' book, or books by people of a wide range of other religious backgrounds, or statements by people's denominations, can be a way to cut through some of that resistance. And it can also, in the classroom, be helpful simply to distinguish what science is trying to do from what other human endeavors are aiming at, whether they be religion or art or what have you. This is a slide from understandingscience.org, which is a wonderful, wonderful site. Lots of great lesson plans for teachers about teaching the nature of science. I would encourage people to check that out. They've got this useful checklist to help people figure out, is what we're talking about science? And if it's not, it doesn't mean that it's bad, it doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it probably does mean that it doesn't belong in a science classroom. And so when that comes up in a classroom, my suggestion is always to shift from something that's not a scientific debate. Evolution versus creationism is not a scientific debate. There are interesting aspects to it in philosophy or other topics, but ultimately shifting to something real. Were dinosaurs warm-blooded? Which dinosaurs had feathers? Did Triceratops had feathers? It's pretty clear that Tyrannosaurus did, but Triceratops is on a whole another branch of the dinosaur family tree. So exploring that, or does selection dominate over neutral drift in the history of evolutionary theory? That's interesting. That's real science. And colleagues of mine, this is a paper from 2003 that colleagues of mine wrote, describing, helping guide teachers towards controversies that are meaningful. And there was a more recent paper that some colleagues of mine wrote last year in the National Science Teachers Association magazine that, again, I would encourage people to look at, because this idea of using argumentation in the classroom is increasingly popular. And there's often an inclination, we often hear from people who are using creationism and evolution as a way to use argumentation to advance their science lessons. And I think that that's the wrong way to do it. I think shifting, another way to deal with some of these misconceptions is to deal with science as a process, and breaking out of the traditional, very linear model of how science works to, this is again from understandingscience.org, to a more complicated, but, and they have versions of this that are much simplified, but to something that reflects the real complexity and the human social aspects of how science is done. I think that can, emphasizing what it was, what people have done over the centuries, over the century and a half since The Origin of Species was published. How have we gotten to a point where we are so confident in the science of evolution? It's not just a collection of facts, it's a way of testing those ideas. And moving people past the idea of evolution as a tree, or as a ladder, making it into a tree, not this simple linear progression that is so intuitive. You start out with bacteria, worms, fish, amphibians, reptiles. They're each somehow, they seem somehow more, they seem higher. And it's easy for even scientists to fall into that language of the higher plants, the higher animals. And Darwin's key insight was to recognize that there was this branching process that underlies all of the diversity of life, that the NOVA website does a really good job helping people to explore. And exploring that tree and thinking about what it means that there's that tree can be a powerful way to undercut a lot of misconceptions that creationists prey on. One of the most common of those is this idea of missing links or transitional fossils, that evolutionary transitions are this morphing process that you see from, a lizard. The creationists might be fine with a lizard changing colors or changing size, or the size of its tail changing. But the idea of this morphing from a lizard to a bird, with a half bird, half lizard somewhere in between, is not how evolution works. And when you understand how the evolutionary tree works, that makes sense. So going from this sort of linear idea of the evolution of mammals to something like a tree, where you can see there's no single transition. The whole beauty of evolution is that there's the transition from having four bones in the jaw to one jawbone and 3 bones in the ear took millions of years and happens gradually. Each of these fossils is a transition, and it's one part of the tree, while lots of other interesting things were happening on other parts of the tree.
And Josh, I'd like to add real quick. Yeah, these are really great resources. I know people are probably furiously opening up tabs right now to check some of these out. But there's also in this Hangout, there's also a showcase app. If you want to see some of these resources and check them out later, they'll be available anytime. If you go back to this webinar and open this up, if you look in Showcase, you'll see links on the right to a lot of these resources. And one thing that really stuck with me too, as you're talking about sort of this linear idea that a lot of people perceive when they think about evolution, how it's wrong and incorrect. We wrote a really great, or rather, we have a really great blog post from Stephanie Keep, who also works at the National Center for Science Education, and she breaks down a lot of these misconceptions of evolution. She runs a blog as well, also at the NCSC, but these are really great resources, and there's a link to her blog post series on evolution misconceptions in the showcase as well. So I definitely recommend people check that out.
And there's actually a remarkable amount of great material out there. I'll highlight a few things. In addition to the NOVA site, obviously, all of you watching this have access to that. On our website, we've got a lot of material about evolution and creationism and common creationist misconceptions. Understanding Science, unsci.berkeley.edu or understandingscience.com has great material. The same people who made that site also made Understanding Evolution at evolution.berkeley.edu. And you can reach, and we've got a program for teachers. So if you're interested in signing up to hear about other resources as they come available, you can check out our Facebook page just for our teachers' specific Facebook page and Twitter account. And people who are interested in this should definitely check out Evolution Education and Outreach. It's a open access, peer-reviewed journal that has a lot of great material on how to teach evolution and the state of teaching evolution and best practices. The other thing that I think we have going in our favor is that we're at a point where a lot of state science standards do include evolution, and it's a central concept in the next generation science standards, which have been pretty widely adopted. So in the life sciences, evolution is right there as one of the is core idea 4, heavily emphasized K through 12 at all grades and runs through a lot of those standards. And we're up to, I think, 14 states that have adopted NGSS or something very similar to it, and a number of other states are on their way towards adopting it. And even in states where it hasn't been adopted, the textbook publishers, the people who develop the tests, everyone's looking at that as the baseline for what science education should look like. And that can only make it easier for teachers to teach evolution, because the easiest thing to say if someone raises objections to an evolution lesson is to say, look, I have to teach it. It's in the textbooks, it's in the standards, it's going to be on the test. We need to teach it. Here's NCSC's evolution specific page. There's a lot of great resources, including material on handling challenges in the classroom and some primers on basic aspects of evolution that often come up in these sorts of conflicts. You can find news about events in these sorts of battles on our main website, and you can also sign up for our Grand Canyon raft trip. We do this every year, and just this year we're doing for the first time a scholarship for teachers. So that's closed for this summer's trip, but we're going to reopen it for next summer's trip, probably midsummer. So do come back and check that out. We've got 2 remarkable teachers who are going to be coming with us, all expenses paid, spending 8 days on the river with us, exploring deep time, exploring evolution, all that. And I hope you'll all sign up for that as well and try to come with us. We'd love to have you. And be in touch with us if there are ever anything we can do or ever anything that you need help with. We would love to hear from you.
Great. Wow. Thank you so much, Josh. That presentation was great, and I think very helpful to our viewers. We already have quite a few questions here, so I'm going to just jump into them. So this question was sort of submitted early on in the presentation. But this person was wondering, has the attitude of the general public in other countries changed over the same time frame?
That's a good question. I haven't seen a ton of long-term polling in other countries. There's a lot of variation, and the United States is a lot less accepting than most other countries in Europe. Or there was a paper in 2006 comparing a bunch of European countries, Japan, and the United States, and the United States was second only to Turkey of all three of the 36 countries.
Mm-hmm.
So we're lagging relative to a lot of our peer nations, but I don't know that it's harder to look back in time. I don't think that people have been asking that question elsewhere for as long.
Great. Another question. This person says, I'm a university professor in a very conservative area of the country. My institution has tentatively given permission for me to develop a non-majors intro biology course oriented around evolution. Do you have recommendations for developing such a course? So I think you definitely answered that with a lot of the resources that you mentioned via Berkeley's Understanding Evolution website, the Understanding Science page, as well as sort of Nova's resource. But is there anything else you might suggest, particularly for at the university level, that might help this person sort of organize this this course?
Yeah, one other thing that that might be useful there is something called it's David Sloan Wilson's group, the EVOS Consortium. If you go to evostudies.org, they've got they do a lot to try to set up a minor in evolutionary biology or other sorts of non-majors courses of that sort. So, and there are people there who would have some experience setting that up and trying to avoid getting into too much trouble on the way. A certain amount of trouble is only fair, but the right sort. And I would just emphasize, I think what often I think it's a great idea. I should back up and say I think that it's a really exciting idea to have that, because I think evolution in some ways it's absolutely the foundation of modern biology. It's essential, as I said, to so many other parts of things that people are going to have to deal with, not just to be a doctor, but to be a patient in the 21st century, to understand we're coming to a point where it'll be staggeringly cheap to have your whole genome as part of your medical record. How do you make sense of that without understanding evolution? You can't. How do you understand where in the 70s, Apple Computer and other titans of modern industry started out in people's garages? Right now, people are genetically engineering microbes in their garages, and that's where the next Apple computer is going to come from. It's also where something horrific could come from if people don't think about it really carefully, if they don't understand what the risks are, if they can't talk about it intelligently with their neighbors. So having non-majors understand evolution is absolutely key, and is a really exciting topic. I think that it should be a really great way to engage people in the sciences who might not think of themselves as science people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think too, with regards to, I was just thinking a little bit more about the sort of showcasing the applications of evolution in order to help teach and help students understand it. There is a really great mission that I like in the Evolution Lab, which talks about the use of phylogenetics to actually treat health and disease. And so in it, you're tasked with figuring out which antivenom to give a person bitten by a snake, and you have to identify that snake by using a phylogenetic tree to look at the morphology of that snake in comparison to other snakes in order to figure out the antivenom. And obviously that's a very sort of funny use case for it, but definitely with regards to understanding the different types of the HIV virus that exist, for example, and sort of tracing where they came from requires really deep use and understanding of phylogenetics, and as well as for other infectious diseases as well. And so I definitely would recommend that educators sort of check out that mission and check out the Evolution Lab in general in order to, if they're looking for really good examples of evolution, I guess, use cases that really show how important it is as a foundation to biological sciences.
And there's also great material. The other thing that occurred to me as you were talking is there's something called the Beacon Center, which is a multi-institution consortium of universities focusing on the Beacon. They're studying evolution in action, so they're looking at these same sorts of practical applications for evolution, and helping people understand what those are, and sharing them with people. So there's great material there, and one of my former colleagues at NCSE went to run their education program. So there's a lot of cool stuff there as well.
So another question we got from somebody. So how do I deal with religious parents who are So how to deal with? Question is basically how to deal with religious parents who might be who might have a lot of problems with this teacher teaching evolution in the classroom, and sort of how to sort of manage that relationship when that is a source of conflict.
Yeah, I mean that's something that's really tricky for teachers, because or when it comes up from students, because we can know intellectually that that's where the heart of the issue is, but in the classroom is not the place to be having a discussion about religion, especially not the science classroom. And when the school day is over, these parents are also neighbors. Their kids may be on your same soccer team. You don't want to get into a fight with people. You want to have a resolution to those sorts of conflicts that's satisfying to all involved. And I think the key is really often. So there are two parts of it that I would say. One is that often these things come up because people feel like there's not a way for their concerns to be heard at all. So just letting them know that they're being heard, saying, I hear you, I understand where you're coming from. To the extent that it's true to say I share your concerns, and then distinguishing between what science does, what you're doing in the science classroom, from what happens in Sunday school or what happens in these broader contexts, and helping. Sometimes it's enough to just say, here's my lesson plan where we're talking about evolution. Here's the textbook chapter about evolution. Now it integrates all through the whole semester or through the whole year, but here's what we're actually talking about. Do you have a concern about the idea that if there are some animals that are bigger and some that are smaller, and the smaller ones are better at getting food, that the population is going to get smaller over time? And the parents are not going to say, are going to say, no, of course, that makes complete sense. And do you have a problem with the idea that if there's one population over here that's the larger individuals are better at getting food, and the ones over here, the smaller ones, are getting better at getting food, that those are going to drift apart, that they're going to separate, and over time you're going to have two completely separate populations, right? So just breaking it down, not using the word evolution, don't use trigger words that are going to get people all head up, but just, in simple terms, go over what the topics are, and then at the end say, okay, so that's the evolution lesson. Do you have a problem with any of that? And generally they'll say no. I thought that they think that it's going to be moral philosophy and the nature of what it means to be human, which, like, these are super important questions and we should talk about them more, but probably not in a high school biology class.
Great. So we have another question. So I guess this question is sort of for me, and I'm not sure if this is, I'm assuming this is in reference to the Evolution Lab, but it says it may be a good tool for students who are already interested in science, but it may be very discouraging for students who just don't have any interest or may come from a very religious background. So how does this help these kinds of students? Well, in regards to the Evolution Lab, I guess I would say that because the game is because it's structured as a game, it's organized as a puzzle game, that students are sort of, I wouldn't say they're tricked necessarily into learning science, but the format is definitely one that's much more inviting than I think a textbook might be, or sort of a traditional hour documentary series might be, because of how gamified it is. And so I think emphasizing sort of that element of it, and also sort of showing showing the videos along with it. I mean, the videos are very animated, they're very bright, and they sort of focus on these really interesting case studies. I think that's a really great way to hook students in. But I do think that if there are students who aren't interested in science and may come from a very religious background and may be off-put immediately, I think focusing on sort of the gaming aspect of it is a really great way to sort of hook them in. And I think from what we've seen so far, that's been something that people have really been excited about, is the fact that because it's gamified, that barrier to entry that people have when they think they're going to get a lecture about evolution is sort of removed because it's such a very inviting space as a game that people are sort of used to playing. And again, it can be played on the desktop and also even on a tablet as well. And again, the deep tree. One thing that's interesting about that is because of how open sourced it is, or how open it is, there really isn't a prompt there, and students are sort of free to look up, any animal that interests them, and sort of see where it sort of is placed in this tree of life, but also draw connections between that species and other species. And so I think that sort of interactive, open-ended nature of the deep tree and sort of the gamified aspect of the build-a-tree, and these are both of the major activities in the Evolution Lab, are really inviting to students.
And the other thing I would say is that, and this is something I told when I was TAing classes as a grad student that I would always tell students, is evolution makes biology class easier. Right? You don't have to memorize. Every species is not its own little thing that you just have to memorize a bunch of traits. If you can understand that tree and remember that structure, then you can figure out which, if you don't have to memorize which plants have vascular tissue. As long as you remember the structure of the tree and the basic idea of how all of those parts related, you can probably figure it out. So it actually makes biology class easier. Even if you don't like science class, it lets you get through it more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that for students who are not interested or who have religious concerns or objections, connecting it to something that's pertinent to them, which can be, dog breeding. There are incredible evolutionary examples in dog breeding. Race horses are these sort of marvels of the operating right at the edge of their evolutionary constraints.
Mm-hmm.
A racehorse is at any given moment about a pound or two away from snapping all of its legs, and it's just this tricky interplay that racehorse breeders have had to go through. The human body, there's amazing stories. Neil Shubin's Your Inner Fish does a great job laying out some of those ways that are things that are weird about our own body. Hiccups makes sense when you understand the evolution of the human body and of tetrapods going back to 350 million years ago. And that's a way that you can engage people. There's no moral argument there. There's nothing really objectionable. No one can criticize it. It just makes sense. And once you're there, you're there.
Yeah. Nice, great. All right, so I think I don't see any additional new questions, and I think we're running close to the end of the program. So I guess I really just want to say again, thank you so much, Josh, for joining me in this conversation and for prepping that great presentation. It's a really, really great overview. Again, if you want to access this later on, this webinar will be available immediately on YouTube. It's also streaming live on YouTube, so you can watch it there and share it with fellow educators or anybody else who has any questions about it. In addition, you can go back to this link at any time in the future to access links to all those resources. If you open up, again, the Showcase app, I've created links for all the resources that Josh and I discussed throughout the course of this webinar. So again, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Josh.
Glad to be here. Happy evolution education, everyone.
All right. And I know, the school year, I think, is pretty much ending for most people, but definitely come back to these resources back in the fall once things start up again. And again, I think you mentioned that there's a really great summer program in there. I think there are some really great summer opportunities. So definitely reach out to Josh. And again, you can also find us on Twitter if you have any additional questions or have any other questions about these resources. We're at the Nova Labs, and Josh, I think you're at your name, right? At Josh Rosenau.
At Josh Rosenau, just like that.
So again, thank you for joining us. Please, you can follow up with us in the comments of this page or on YouTube if you have any additional questions. Definitely check out a lot of the great resources that Josh mentioned. Definitely check out the Evolution Lab. One thing I did forget to mention about the Evolution Lab is there's a great playlist of videos. So for the Evolution Lab, we created these really great quick 2 to 5 minute videos that explain key pieces of evidence for evolution, everything from fossils to biogeography through to DNA, and that's all covered really beautifully with these watercolor animated videos that students, from what I've seen, have enjoyed watching. Hope they're not just faking it in front of me. But yeah, definitely check these resources out. And again, thank you for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, all.